Hello, friends, family, and keepers of the faith, and welcome to another weekend Del Boy blog. This one is year 2 blog 24, or in legacy numbers, blog 76. So 76 weeks, my God. And it's dated the 6th of August 2023. I'm so sorry, really, about last week. I had something that I wouldn't normally do, and a bleep came up on the phone, and I decided to look at it, just with a glance, and I didn't recognize what it was, but it had a word in it that drew my attention, and I had to pause the video, and I read it, and I needed to keep going with my blog. And it was ransomware. And this occurred sort of about 7 weeks, I think, nearly possibly 8 weeks from when I was hacked. And it had a lot of information in there that basically I took it quite seriously, as you should anyway. Ransomware is one of those weird things where you can get it all the time, but it's so generic, there's no way that anything's going to happen. And then there are other ones that hit a vein, something where something's happened very just recently. They put information in the email that you can see that they've been in your machine, and then it raises that point to you where you worry. So I read it, got quite worried, continued with my blog, and at the end I got quite angry, quite stern. What happened after that, I'm only going to briefly talk about it, was that I went on the website, obviously, and forwarded the email to the government website for hacking and fraud. And in the morning, I contacted the police and got a crime reference number. The more I read it, the more I didn't get angry. It's just I got to the bewilderment of it all. Like, what can you do? The argument was always there. If you pay the money, they'll do what they want to do anyway. So the argument wasn't there. And it was one of those things where, well, whichever way it happens, they ain't getting no cash. The second thing is, do I talk about it too much? Because if the person knows that much, they might know I've got a channel, therefore watch this and get even more het up. All those sort of things come into your mind. The deadline was 48 hours. And 48 hours came, it went, nothing happened. And during that time, I spoke to the police twice. And it sort of like has become a dodging a bullet, I suppose, type thing, or it could still happen at any time. The worst thing about this is it brings back bullying. The worst a bully could ever do to you, other than the fright you have on how much physical damage they could do to you because you're not a fighter, is the fact that they always come out with a comment like, I could do this at any time. And that makes you dwell, and it makes you think it could be a month down the line, it could be tomorrow, it could be at the end of the year. What do I do about it? And the thing I've learned about is let it happen. There's not an awful lot you can do. So I'm going to end it there because I don't want to give too much precedence to it all. But it's not had a good week. It's been the first 5-day week for me at work. Been very, very tired. I've not wanted to do any content. The only content I've done is appear on a chat channel about films. And I've thanked God for some of the friends out there that noticed it, commented on it, wanted to know how I was, And some people even did content to cheer me up. And to those people, thank you so much, because I don't think I'd have probably have got through the week much, because it wasn't about me totally, but it's the fact that how much can you keep away from loved ones like your mother, who's wouldn't understand it anyway, and are of an age where they worry because not only am I their son, um, what can they do about it, and they get more head up about it as well. But you have to mention it because I do stuff for my mum, and if this person's got content, then of course they can do stuff against my mother. So yeah, that was probably the biggest thing about it all. But hey, let's start off on the right note, shall we? The weather. What can we say? Every day I hear my mum say, "It's August. What sort of weather is this?" And I'm going, "Yes, I know, mum, but I can't do nothing about it." And she knows I can't do anything about it, but it's just she needs to talk about something. But every day it's raining, don't like it, and I'm going, what can I do? I got to go out for a walk in it. I got to go out in your garden and make it look nice with the rain coming down and the wind and blowing all of the long, tall flowers up. It's just been another headache on top of another headache. But again, what can I do about it? Nothing. Live your life, I suppose, that tomorrow's not going to come. And if it's raining, it's raining. I actually enjoyed walking a little bit in the rain. It cleared. It's the water on my skin was quite nice. As I was walking along, it wasn't uncomfortable. I had waterproof stuff on. So, to be quite honest, it was the fresh air was the nicest thing about it all. So that was great. But we start off with the news, don't we? Let's do things in the nice coordinated manner that I'm supposed to do things, shall we? And we remembering that the news is just a date stamp, no opinion-y type thing on it. It's to say, hey, Del Boy, on this particular week, these things were going on in the world. And I can then come back to it like a diary and go, oh yeah, I remember when that person died, or I remember when that went up, or I remember when that was announced, that sort of thing. So we start off with the war, because as we know, the war continues. In fact, yesterday I think they had a game for Ukraine on TV. I watched a bit of it, Legends TV. I'm not really that interested in that type of football. They always end up a draw, or one side wins, but they praise the other one, saying, "Oh, didn't they do well?" And yeah, entertaining, but fodder for me, I'm afraid. So, war. A Russian tanker with 11 crew members has been hit in a Ukrainian attack in the Black Sea, Russian officials say. It is reported the vessel's engine room was damaged in the overnight strike. No one was hurt, was the final report. Ukraine has not officially commented, but a security source stated a sea drone was used. So we talked a little bit about the Black Sea. We've talked a little bit about Russians turning around and saying every boat, including civilian boats, are now a target. And Ukraine have come back and said, right, eat this. So what more can I say about it other than, hey, if you're going to start using words, and if you're going to start following through with things, we'll start making it a bit real, shall we? And it certainly became real with that attack. So we move past that and we get to the UK news, and it's been a mixed bag of stuff in the UK news, and it's all, as far as I know, been bad. Let's start off really with Thursday, when I was starting to listen to the news a little bit closely, because my blog is a Sunday, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, tends to be me listening a little bit, and if there's a big news event, I'll make a note, and if not, there'll probably be something later on in the week. And this interested me. So the Bank of England increases interest rates by 0.25% for the 14th time in a row to 5.25%. And on its own, I'm just going, yeah, we know about inflation. We know that the banks say that the only way to manage inflation is to increase interest rates. Interest rates have a double-edged sword because they can be good for savings, but they can be bad for the buying public. But they say it's the only way to keep inflation down. The interesting part of it was they were debating. There was a board at the Bank of England that chose what to do, and it was a split vote. Some of them said no changes, some of them said lower it, but the majority, and I think it was a majority of one, said increase. So there is the democratic angle on things, and it is what it is, and it's gone up. And the outcome, from what I've listened to of everything that was going on that day, is hard times ahead. But there is signs that we can start bringing things down. Now, all I see that as doing is next month it'll go down to what it was the previous month, which is 5%. And unless you're going to get this down to 4 or something, we're not going to see anything. And if they're going to drop them month by month, you're looking at January. Do you see what I'm getting at? So I'm not thinking so far ahead as January. I mean, other people have got Christmas sorted by now. I haven't. I look at that in November, October. Do you see what I mean? For Christmas. And some people don't look at it until 2 weeks before the event. So getting Christmas out of the way and not mentioning it anymore today. I'm looking day to day, and at the moment there's a lot of things going on at work in regards to pay. Apparently they've got something wrong with my pay, so they're looking at it. So at the moment, all my colleagues are getting their new pay packet, and I'm not at the moment, but it will be backdated. We had a cost of living one-off payment made to us. Helpful, thank you very much. I don't know if other in the private sector are getting that, but I do know that the private sector, your wage increases are much bigger than the public sector. So maybe that cost of living, when I look at it closely, will help me a little bit. At the same time that this article came out about inflation, there was some more bad news, and it literally was half an hour later, and it was sort of broadcast about midday, about 12 o'clock. And it said the following: High street store Wilko went into administration and warned it is close to collapse. This will affect 12,000 jobs and 400 stores. And the interesting thing about this one was, we've been talking about the high street for a start for so many years now, that it's now become like going to the dentist and having that nerve exposed, you know, where it throbs and then goes away and then comes back. And I had to go into Wilko literally that lunchtime at 1 o'clock. Because I was working at the office that day. I'd travelled to my office of choice instead of working from home, and I needed to get some stuff for the garden, some nuts for the birds, some seeds for the birds, and some borders, little wooden borders that you can put to sort the edge out of your lawn. And they were a bit expensive, so I thought I could probably find something cheaper. But it was a horrible lunchtime because I walked in there and everybody that was behind the counter was so, you know, their demeanour, you could see it was affecting them. The people that were stocking the shelves, they were talking to each other about it. You could overhear the conversations. and it must be one of the most horriblest times for them. And my heart went out to them, to be quite honest. And I wish them well. Wilko's one of those stores that I started to use a lot more when our local ironmonger sort of closed down. Although there are B&Q and DIY stores, Wilko seems to be just in the high street without having to go to a um, sort of like one of those shopping outlets that are slightly outside of town. So you could just walk in and get what you want. They sell, clean products and paint and garden stuff and pet food stuff and a little bit of everything, even seeds for you to grow plants from pots for next year. And I don't go into them all the time, but when I do go to them, I appreciate that they're there, because, to be quite honest, not everything is in a Sainsbury's or a Tesco. So I do hope that something happens for Wilko. I do hope that somebody comes along, and I do hope they find that way that they can keep the stores open, but also have a presence that keeps them going online, say, to keep the stability there. We all know about previous stores like HMV going under, and then they came back, and that they're re-looking at their model of keeping an online presence and a store presence. And there are many other stores that are doing exactly the same thing, and they seem to be just about keeping their head above water, but it's a battle every day. So yeah, that's all I can say about that. And the last bit about English news was Storm Anthony hit Britain Saturday, with warnings from the Met Office of a risk of life and disruption to travel. Yes, the Met Office like to give these storms names, and it's Anthony, so it's the first one of the year. See, Anthony. And all I can say about it is that all I've heard through this year is how hot it is in Europe and how miserable it is in Britain, and why it's so miserable in Britain with the jet stream, and how low and high pressure works. And I do recommend in the next week or so going to my friend Colin Jones' Ponder, because he's going to give his own interpretation of how he understands how this weather is affecting us at the moment and why it's happening. It will be very interesting. He gave me a quite big insight in my own comments. It was a bit, my blogs were getting so long that it was a bit wordy for me to read out verbatim, but I encouraged everybody to read it, and I've read it. And I'm big on the news, so of course I listen to the weather at the end of the end of the news broadcasts. So it's an interesting thing to look out for. And that ends the UK part of the news, and then there was just a death that isn't somebody that you'd go, oh, my childhood is now collapsing in on me again. This was a particular actor that has a checkered career for me, and that was a guy called Paul Rubens, who is probably more recognised as Pee Wee Herman. Now, this is quite a biggish American character, mostly from the mid-80s up until the early 2000s. He had a very checkered career, but he was that type of character that looked a little bit weird. The way that he dressed and made himself up made him more weird than when you see him in his normal, natural photographs. But because he was more a childhood hero, a character that appealed to kiddies, some things happened to him that checkered his career, and that was that he was caught masturbating, unfortunately, in an adult cinema, and or that was a misdemeanor apparently, but it really altered his career. And then later on, I think a good 10 years or so, they raided his house, for which they found photographs which were again of a nature that you had to doubt his own character and integrity on what he portrays as a character. So I won't forget him because of the films that he was in and his voice and what I know he did in his early days for kiddies. He was a very funny, weird type of guy. But nobody wants anybody to die. And he died of cancer, which he'd been battling for a number of years. And I hope he now has gone to a place that's restful. And all of those things that clouded him and irritated him and caused him to be what he was has now all gone away. It's all I can say, really. A person that doesn't really affect me, or I think most of England, but to America, an out-of-box character that you really liked or you really hated. Very divisive, a bit like Marmite, we call that statement in England. And we'll move to the shout-out, shall we? We got the news out the way. We got a lot of my crap out the way. We'll move to the nicer stuff, the shout-outs. Thank you so much for all these people that have basically wanted to know how I was, commented about it, raised some questions for this particular blog. They want to know what my opinion is. You're the type of people that I'm pointing this blog at, knowing full well that my blog really is a legacy for me to leave behind for my family, so it won't be changing too much. But hey, more subscribers, who knows, might polish my act up a little bit. I think it's in a good place at the moment. I'm quite happy. So the shout outs this week are Wee Bob R, Scott the Movie Critic, Carl Todd, Jambon, Denny, Martroid, Ian Hill the Ramblings, Robert's Retro Gaming, David's Retro Games Played Badly, Paul Patrick, Steve's Gaming, Milfy Swimbuckle, Colin Jones / Ponder. Thank you so much. And we're going to really get to the bit now where they have actually commented, and I'll read out a few of the comments, things that stick out a little bit. And if there are questions, I'll try and answer them. I've noticed my blogs are getting quite long. So I'll try and pick and choose a little bit, but you've all taken your time out. I feel I need to read them out verbatim. I'm terrible. I really ought to concentrate and focus this. It was much more focused at the beginning. Take it like that. It's not now. But to a lot of people, some people are saying they like the length, actually. They find it nice to come back to, once or twice, not watch it in one big block. So for that, thank you. Whichever you find entertaining, please continue to keep looking at those bits. So what we've got, these are in no particular order, by the way. So we've got Wee Bob Art. Great to watch along and listen to. Del, hope things are going better for you this week, and I guess I will see when Sunday comes round. I don't have a question this week, but I hope that you have a lovely weekend and that your mum is doing well. All the best. Well, thank you, Wee Bob Art. I have to say it's been a very busy time. It's been great that you made a comment. I myself haven't been diversing myself out enough to sort of see if you've got your artwork going along, to see whether you've done that Spider-Man drawing for me. I need to sort of go back to some of the things that entertained and made me smile, because I tell you what, your channel did do all of that. I learned something, even some of the technology, which I'm usually quite hot on. I learned on your site because of the way that you draw on digital platforms. So, I'm going to make sure that I go back and look at that stuff and relive it, because I found it very therapeutic. Thank you so much. And with that, I hope you find this blog entertaining for you to continue to come back when you can. We Bob is what I can say to you on that. Scott the movie critic says, excellent blog, Del Boy, really enjoyed it, mate. Thank you for the shout out, really appreciate it. Pete, Nigel and Andy have some amazing content out currently, mate. The top 10 videos from the 70s from Andy was just great to watch, wasn't it? Just, I must admit, I like looking back at the 70s, and when somebody of Andy's age is looking retrospectively at it, I'm getting a different view than my own that lived through it. Do you see what I mean? So that's where I feel I'm not a fossil anymore, because I can see another younger person's eyes looking at it. And that's the same thing that I was doing when I was looking at 50s and 60s cinema, where I wasn't around or understood it. So that's great. Nigel is one of the funniest guys on YouTube. He's hilarious. Oh, isn't he just? And he's the sort of person that has got me through this week, to be quite honest. Nigel is one of those characters that's had a horrible, horrible year or more. And he's living through a process at the moment that you wouldn't want to wish on your worst enemy. And every day must be like, what's today going to bring for me that's bad? So to have, like subscriber mail come through to him to open, to cheer him up, to be able to go and see some of his friends again, but not be too far away from his wife, is great. And to talk about his passions and look at his collection is something where I'm being educated and seeing a person trying to turn their life around. In other words, he's looking very much like I was at the very beginning of my blog, where I started off on a negative and I wanted to turn that negative around to a positive. And he, from what I could tell of his last video, he's 5 subscribers away from 500 subscribers. I do hope that happens this week for him. I can't think of a nicer guy to hit a milestone like that. But as he's always said, it's not about subscribers. He does it because it keeps his mind focused on something. He likes to entertain. He likes to show bits and bobs of his stuff. He loves to chat and talk about movies on chat room broadcasts and streams, and he entertains us. So what a guy. Peter's an absolute legend, has some great streams on Wednesday nights, and there's always great to be a part of. Yes, because he always invites you along. I've started to come along to a couple of them. I've been really appreciative of that. I've used that word before. I felt less of a fossil being around you guys that are younger and having a different insight. I could bring up a film that you guys would go, never heard of it. And what was happening when I first joined some of those streams was that you were talking about films that I should know about, but I don't. Mostly probably because they were the horror genre, but because they were also modern. And I still go to the cinema, but I don't pay attention too much to some of the direct-to-video horror stuff that's going on. And I'm missing a big chunk of what I used to watch in the 80s. So I'm being re-educated, and that's coming from a younger audience. So that's the reason. And if I could ever, help or entertain by coming on and talking about another aspect or another view on things, use me, abuse me, I don't care. You've made me feel alive again, I suppose, is the best way to think about it. Thank you as always for supporting my content. You continue. and watching the live streams as well, mate. Much appreciated. It was great having you on Friday. This was a week or so ago. We all had an amazing time that night. It was great to have you part of it. Yes, and I had much fun. It really did help me because I was heading towards that week of starting my 5-day week at work. Friday is a good couple of days before I need to concentrate on that. And Friday I was doing an awful lot of work for my mate who's coming down to see me in a couple of weeks. So it was nice to sort of like settle back and be part of that stream. Thank you so much is what I can say. Watch Scott's Movie Critic channel. It really is quite good. He does some entertaining stuff with film reviews, stuff that he's picked up this week, where to buy some great bargains. He's just celebrated a birthday, so his birthday haul was immense. My God, I'm lucky to get a card. This guy's got videos like this. He's got my monthly pickups in a day. Wish that happened to me, but no. I don't want to look at it negatively like that. I have great birthdays, but I think you get what I mean in regards to what a lucky bugger you were, Scott, on that day. Salute to you, sir. And we move to they always keep putting these abbreviations of names when I'm looking at stuff. It's Carl Todd. Of course it's Carl Todd. He's put hi Del, because it's put Del Carl, you see. Hi Del, hope that things have calmed down for you after that stressful message you received. Thank you so much for that, Carl. I hope that your stamina is getting better as you get back to full working week. It was a stressful one, and I can't deny that I was glad that Friday at work got to a point where I said I'm going to stop doing business as usual work, get myself more organized, and use something called L&D, which is learning and development, where you can put time aside to do training. And I decided to get a few training courses done, and that puts me in good stead for the following week, where I can concentrate on the business again and know that I got some of the training stuff. And then when we get to the end of the month, my training calculator doesn't look like I did nothing. So yeah, that was good that came along on Friday, because I was so tired. Sleep deprivation, blurriness of eyes, they're all still there. Hard to train as well, unless there's a lot of training videos for you to watch. And I chose a couple that luckily had videos in them, so it wasn't like reading blocks and blocks of text and a little exam at the end. Do you know what I mean? So I found it very helpful, but I also realized that the next time I'm doing 5 days, I'm not going to be so lucky. And I've got to get through that barrier. So yeah, stressful. As always, thanks for answering the previous questions. Here are some new ones. Smashing. So here we got some questions. You've mentioned the Zap event. Apart from meeting Alan and other YouTube Discord friends, who are you looking forward to seeing the most and why? Good question, really. I have sort of answered it, but only mentioned it, really, is that this is a big event for me, because I've only ever been to one other event last year, which was my friend Jambon, and we went to a pinball festival. This one has a night part to it, plus a section during the day where you can go around and look at your childhood or early teens stuff. You know, like there'll be Spectrums out, I'm sure, and Commodores out. Even though it's a Zap event, there will be other stuff there. But the evening is where I'm really looking forward to, because they've already mentioned that Rob Hubbard, a person who I nearly met but didn't quite, he had left earlier that day, according to Codemasters, who I was visiting that day, said to me. Don't know if that's true or not, you see. I can ask him that question. So you got Rob Hubbard, a musician that I think all of us that had Commodore 64s very endful to listen to what he has to say and reminisce about that period of our lives. But Jeff Minter's going to be there, and Jeff is somebody who I've only met once. He won't remember me, but I went at a time where the Amiga was just about to be released, and it was just a chance meeting. He had a stand, but he frequented mostly where the bar was. And he was talking to some other people, and you just happened to be just able to walk sort of into the group, and you could sort of like interrupt, say something. And I was talking about Sheep in Space, which at the time was, and still is, probably one of my top 5 Jeff Minter games. And he started to talk about the Amiga, and he said, about what his hopes were for the future of that machine, and some of the things that he was concerned about. If I remember rightly, he was more concerned about mid and high level management blowing it all to the point where the machine will get nowhere. I think that's what he said, just about. So, 6 years on from that event in London at the Novotel Hotel, by the way, Commodore go under. So, a profit maybe? I don't know. So I'm looking forward to seeing those two. So I hope that, and the reason why, because you always love to see your boyhood past come back to be able to reminisce again and hopefully learn some new things. Number 2, you say, if there was a similar event aligned with a different magazine, i.g. Crash for the Spectrum, Amtrix for the Amstrad, Amiga Format for the Amiga, Micro User for the BBC, Superplay for the SNES, etc., what event would you prefer, and who would you like to have as guests? Wow, my God. Now, I was lucky at the beginning of the 80s to have more machines than I think many people would ever do. And the reason for that was I was repairing some of them, because there was a shop in my town that took in old equipment to trade in for newer ones. And that meant that I got things like an Auric Atmos or an Auric 1 or an MSX and Spectrums and so forth, because they wanted a bigger and better machine. So what I'm trying to get at is that I could mention, I'd love to go to a Crash event or an Amtrix event, but I don't know whether I would feel the excitement as I would to the Zap event, because the Commodore 64 was something that I had for more years than all of the others. The thing that's changed to me about the industry an awful lot is that we used to go to these big London events, and there used to be gaming events, but they all moved to the States mostly, like the Electronic Gaming yearly event. And then when the pandemic came along, it all went online. But even when it came to these events where you saw a lot of the smaller companies that sold add-ons that weren't mass marketed, things like a tape duplicator that you used to put into the back of your Commodore 64, a piece of software that turned your music into light shows. All of that sort of stuff was not something marketed by Ocean, was in a small little panel that was in the news pages at the end, should I say. We're all at these events. And I managed to pick up a lot of software at these events for things like ray tracing, say, art packages, Mandrabolt generators, those things that use mathematics to generate fractals. And then, pieces of hardware like flash carts, like freeze frame cartridges and joystick splitters and all of that sort of stuff. And those have now, they seem to be at computer fairs. And there is a computer fair that comes to my hometown once a year. But what they're doing is they're just selling the graphic cards you could buy off of Amazon. You know, they're those things that sell those pieces of software that you'd only get on mail order, and public domain stuff was a part of my journey going to those events. I'd love those events, one of those events now, in the style of how it was, but that time's gone by, and they're too expensive to organise, and they mostly now turn up at the arcade events that always tend to be at Blackpool or Newcastle, and they don't tend to be close to me that much. And if they were, I'd be going by myself, which I'd have hoped at my time of year I'd have still friends that would want to come along with me. And that's not the case. So I'm glad I'm going along to the Zap event. It's going to be wonderful to meet a couple of people that I've known now for quite some time and have met up with already. But I'm hoping that there'll be a couple more from Discord that will be going. They haven't said. But if they don't, it's going to be just nice to be there. Probably do a little video or two for a blog, you know, a little 5-minute segment, and just really have an entertaining time with like-minded friends. So thank you so much, Carl. That was brilliant. We'll move to Jambon after I've had some product placement. Oh, so much better. Ugh. Hi, Del. Thanks for another excellent vlog. Hope your toilet seat is still on nice and tight after that epic struggle. I'll tell you what, that was an epic struggle, and it better well be on tight, otherwise my mum's arse is going to go through it. So I have to make sure that that's okay. Jambon. I notice you got a suggestion about putting these vlogs in podcast form. I sometimes find podcasts a bit more convenient too, but I totally get why you're going for with the video format. And of course, podcast hosting fees can be pricey. Yes, they can. I sometimes use 4K video decoder to extract the audio and play it through my podcast app, and then I have the best of both worlds. Just thought I'd mention that on the chance that some folk don't know what this is, and is a nice, easy solution that only takes a minute to do. Yes, it was a great suggestion from I think it actually was Carl. But it's one of those things where the blog is supposed to be what I look like to my niece and nephews, showing off some of the things that might be worth something, show you guys some of the trailers to films I've watched this week, that sort of stuff, which has definitely got a visual element to it. And of course, like you say, the podcast, if you want to go to somewhere like Spreaker or Podbay, those sort of things, generally cost a monthly figure. And I've got just over 100 subscribers. It wouldn't make financial sense at this stage. I get to 200 and more, and putting something out might be beneficial, but then people would go to the podcast rather than the video part, and the numbers would dwindle. It's a tricky one. I'm still at a very, very lower stage. It makes perfect sense to many of my friends' subscribers that have got thousands of subscribers, and even subscribers in the 500 plus range. Total sense, right? Me, no. Not at this stage. But your suggestion, I hope that helps them out, and I'm glad I've read it out so that people could possibly do that. Question, if you don't mind, and it hasn't been asked before. Did you ever used to get in trouble at school? Question mark. In other words, were you ever a juvenile delinquent? Sorry. In retrospect, I was a right little dickhead at school and wished I'd been a bit more sensible. I think there's always, and put it in your words, dickhead in us. And I think there's always that point where we did silly things at school and you got in trouble for it and you had detention or played around too much. But I was the person that was picked on by bullies, and I tried to blend into the background so that I wasn't picked on so much. I always thought, if I'm a mouse and don't open my mouse mouth and they can hear me squeak, I'll not be the person to pick on for the day, and they'll pick on someone else. So you didn't therefore try to entertain the class by doing something that would get you into trouble, you know. Saying that, there was always times where I did. But that's really the boring answer to that one. And it is a boring answer. But I think a lot of people that probably were picked on had either two personas. They were the jovial, constantly trying to make people smile and joke person that was larger than life, or they were the blend in the background, you don't know they're there, and I was the latter. So it's a bit of a boring answer, really. But but an interesting question, and thank you so much, and I hope I've answered it okay. It's just that's the truth, really. Then we get to Denny, my good mate Denny. Here we go. Hey Adele, hope you're well, my friend. Things are improving a little for you. I remember well the lack of energy and sleep. It's so deliberating, isn't it? I understand how that feels, but the dizziness must be a concern for you. Crossed fingers since I've started taking lecanapline. Things have changed dramatically and my BP has dropped. Hope the doctor can sort you out, mate, as that's half the battle. And yes, and this is where I'm approaching the first proper 2-week holiday where I've actually wanted to book a holiday, which is the end of August, beginning of September, which is where I've always took a 2-week holiday. It's sort of like that Indian summer nice point where you take holiday, where I'm probably going to push as hell to see a doctor and go, I'm sorry, I'm not going to take this telephone nonsense anymore. I want to come in for a physical and see where it leads me. And maybe they'll find something out that concerns them so much they go, right, you're quite right, and we need to get this sorted. And they'll put me in touch with someone where I can go, because this swapping and changing of medication, let's see whether anxiety goes away because you're back at work, and all of this experimental nonsense needs to go away. Okay, so thanks again for answering my question. Warlord of Atlantis is the one I'm still waiting for on Blu-ray. I love the Victorian feel and vibe of all the 4 films. And I think it was you, Denny, that made me go and get Warlords of Atlantis on Blu-ray. Let me quickly just look. You know, it's one of those things where I thought I saw it in that pile of videos at the top there where I recently got it out. But it was you that posted a picture of Warlords of Atlantis in a case, a DVD case. And it reminded me, because Doug McClaw, of course, that I need to get that. And I bought it. And it was not that long ago that I thought it was on the top, but it's not. Stupid me. Hope I didn't break up a little bit through that. I like the question on scary robots. I too remember the fembots of the Bionic Woman. One other mention is from a TV movie called The Annihilator from 1986. Well worth a look if you can. My God, I haven't thought about that in ages. But I could have mentioned things like Tom Baker's first story in Doctor Who, the robot. That was menacing. But yeah, interesting. because most robots, and I'm sure down the rabbit hole would probably agree with me as well, that we think of are things like C3PO, R2D2, and all of those sort of stuff, and they're friendly robots. Do you know what I mean? I'll have to have another think, and I bet you there's another one that's just right on the tip of my tongue, and I can't quite say it. Do you know what I mean? The death of physical media in Australia is extremely worrying if it takes hold over here and the USA. Personally, Disney are making huge mistakes, and I think down the line there will be a major rethink from the studios. Thank God for the independents like Shout, Imprint, etc. Yeah, Arrow, and all of those. I have to agree. As much as I keep turning around and saying this is the reason why they're doing it, that's not me backing them, right? I always come across thinking, did I come across there by being pro to streaming? Because I am not. I am the absolute opposite. It's just that I know from looking at the press, Disney want a streaming service. They want to keep doing films, and they're hoping that the money from streaming can be put into the movie industry for them to then get that film and stream it. They don't want the physical media aspect of things. When they sell a film on, they get nothing from resales, going to car boot sales and stuff. They get none of that money. They get it just from the sale. And usually people are picking them up after several months of them being on sale at full price at a much cheaper price. So, of course, definitely physical media is low on their agenda. I hope they turn it around, and sadly, although I'm a glass half full type guy at the moment, I see it being half empty for this one at the moment, and I'm having very difficult time being buoyant about it. All I can do is just continue what I always do, which is, oh my God, they're bringing that out, I'm buying it. Do you know what I mean? And buy it. In a hope, and from what I can tell, I mean, I go and try and buy something at the moment, and if I haven't pre-ordered it within the first 5 hours, it's sold out. So there must be a heck of a lot of people out there, and hopefully they're not scalpers, bloody picking these things up. So there we go. So you continue. So great pickups again for 10 quid. There's a new release from Laurel and Hardy called Year One of the Restored Silence from 1927 from the 1st of September. That's definitely one I'll be picking up. The Ennio Morricone documentary is something I'd like to see. Please do. If you're ever into soundtracks, Ennio Morricone is a big chunk of a composer to start getting intrigued or investigating on. The documentary is top notch. Seeing this old guy looking at manuscript and writing down notes manually by hand for every single note, and then playing some of his back catalogue. It's such a gorgeous video. What I had to buy on physical media. I wish the physical media one had a CD included in it of the music that was in the show, in the documentary, but it was good on what it was because it had a booklet in there and I learned so much more. Right, question for this week, you say. This relates to that Lost Defender game on YouTube from a few weeks back. I wonder, how do these anti-piracy game designers back then feel now with a lot of the earlier games from the many systems that were released? Lost to time due to the stance on piracy, ? What's your take on this? Yeah. Piracy, the protection that people used to have to use, and the software now being lost in time, and you're not being able to play them because the piracy is still there. Yeah. I don't think getting past the piracy is the problem, but it's the fact that it's harder to find these titles now because they were such indie products that even Steam now have relinquished in their library, and shows just why physical media is such a strong thing to me. Because if I'd have got the disc on, say, a public domain disc, or even on a CD on the front cover of a magazine, I'd still have it. In fact, when we were talking about this Defender, I went back to my PC Gamer magazines where there was a CD every week around about that time to see whether it was on there, and it wasn't. Because they used to like putting things on their discs, you know, from bedroom coders. So I wonder myself. But the people that wrote, I don't feel bad towards the people that wrote the copy protection, because they were probably hired to do that role for them in the team that's developing the game. They would have purposely hired a company to put the protection on after the coding has been done, or an in-house person to write that copy protection and put it on. And a lot of the stuff that was out there was DRM, digital rights management, where it was always on internet connections for you to be able to play it. I remember there was somebody was turning around and saying, I'd love to be able to go back and play Rise of Nations, I think it was, or one of the follow-ups, Rise of Legends, I think it was. They said, but the servers have all been cut off. And because the DRM element of it says it has to have an always-on internet connection, I can't even install the game and play it anymore. And then if you looked around, you found that there was a patch where you didn't even need to have the CD in, and you could play the game as a single player by having this executionable. And then the community has got together and done new maps. And this is where I'm saying, for every bit of copy protection that was out there, there's a community that started up for like-minded people that want to still play that game. But it won't be long before those fan-made websites go, because it's like, oh, we came back, you used us, you got the patch, and now you don't want to come back to us anymore because there's nothing going on. And nobody has got a money outlet that will be able to pay the monthly fees, so we rely on things like the Internet Archive to archive it all, and then they're under battle because of having potentially pirated stuff on their sites. It's a mess, and we've got to get that mess sorted, whether it's by law or us as fans having a communal area to put this stuff in. Wouldn't it be great if a billionaire came along and set up something like that because he wanted to give back? Wouldn't it? Yeah. As always, passing my best regards to your mother. Thank you so much. I will, Denny. Martroid says, thanks for the kind words. By the way, Denny, my salute. Thanks for the kind words. Man, the Big Lebowski film, so good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to going back to that. I still haven't yet. I've been so tired this week. But I'm looking forward to going back to that. Ian Hill, The Ramblings, who's got his own channel, has come back for the second week and said, thanks again for the shout out. I've enjoyed your blog. Gives a nice calm feeling. I'm not a gamer. My only knowledge I have was in the 90s when my son was a child. He, of course, is now 33 and still gaming. Here is a question for you, which reflects my experiences. What films have you not watched which are well loved and highly rated? One of my viewers and supporters, Sean, sent me quite a lot of Blu-rays films recently. Amongst them was Pulp Fiction, which I've never really seen. Wow, I fell in love with it. Straight away, the 2 hours and 45 minutes just went by so quickly. Why had it taken me so long to see this? I felt like I did when I saw Blade Runner on release at the cinema. A film that has a big lifetime impression on me. So iconic and important in the history of film. Love it. I wonder how many more there are like this to experience. That is very exciting, thinking about all of that. And oh my God, what a nicely worded comment. And one that's going to be hard for me to answer, just for the selfish reason that I watched for the biggest part of my life in the 80s and 90s and collected so many films that there weren't that many in that period that I didn't watch. There was little that went by, even if something went direct to DVD or video, I had it or I'd seen it. And then when I had my own house and I had a fast enough internet connection, I was downloading like mad. Because I couldn't afford to buy the discs that all my friends were, because I had a mortgage all of a sudden. And then when I moved back to home, and my health was not great, but I had the sale of my house money, I bought big box sets. But I suddenly realized that I was wasting the money that I got from the outlet of my house to buy a product that basically was going down in price a couple of months later. But I bought purposely big blocks of stuff that I really wanted in my collection, like the Doctor Who range, the Star Trek Next Generation 7 seasons on disc in box sets. I bought things like Lost and Prison Break and Spartacus and Stargate and all sorts of big, 24 was a big one. Wired. I started to still buy those at full price, but was picking up little stuff like Man About the House, George and Mildred on the network range, when they were in sales. And suddenly my collection was growing to such a rate that I had nowhere to put it all, and I had to settle back again. And when I settled back again, I didn't then start downloading stuff as much. I'd run out of space on my hard drive. I could buy another one. I bought a NAS. That kept me going for a bit, and then I became a manager. Then I concentrated so much on that. Then my dad died, and all of a sudden, things that break, that I only needed to concentrate on one or two things, a lot of things were breaking, and it was over 10, and I couldn't keep up. And I could fix one or two of these little things, but there was still the mammoth mountain of 8 still to go that I never went back to. And so what happened was I got behind with films. Now, when it comes to, are there any that you have not watched which are well loved and highly rated? There's probably a few, and they'll all be modern stuff. There'll be stuff that I should have gone to the cinema with, but didn't because it was during the pandemic. Or it will be stuff where that big period of time that I've just mentioned stopped me downloading everything, because I started to concentrate on Vincent Price packs, Peter Cushing packs, Hammer Horror collections, and all the stuff that was going around it was new, and I wasn't picking up on those. So there was the odd one that came along, like The Autopsy of Jane Doe, and just recently we've had that Megan. All fantastic. But I go into now these chat rooms, talking about films, and they're talking about things like Terrifier and stuff like that, and I'm going, yeah, I have watched it, and that'd be one that back in the day I'd be all over it. Which is why it's so nice to meet someone like Nige and yourself and Scott, because I'm filling those gaps in, learning about what I've missed, and still keeping my biggest pleasure, which is my childhood with technology, Commodore 64s, Amigas, games, comics, statues, vinyl soundtracks, etc. Films will always be a big part of my life, but it wasn't the top thing of my life, is what I'm trying to get at. But it's enough now that time has gone by where I need to give that a little bit more polish, a bit more love. And I hope that answers your question, to be quite honest. So there isn't really one film. There's lots. And I can't really think of one, because one just doesn't come to mind. because I've just recently got round to watching that billboards, the 5 billboards and so forth, and I've got them on steelbook bought but not opened. So again, I can watch the stuff because I've bought it. I've just never opened the disc of it and got round to watching it again. So thank you so much, Ian. I hope that answers your question. We get to Robert's retro gaming. Oh my God, Robert. Steve and Robert are sort of like really, really, really close friends, and I'm a friend of theirs. Like to be a lot closer. I've always wanted to collaborate with both of them, and I'm hoping that that'll happen before the end of the year. That would cheer me up so much. Steve mentioned it, that he wanted to do something, and maybe we'll get our heads together. I even went to the point with Robert. I was so intrigued by him that I bought a Minecraft server, and it just didn't take off. It's just one of those things. Got to do a little bit more thinking. But anyway, he goes, "Oh man, I was watching and listening along during my vacation travel and at work today when I got the hacker blackmail part of your blog. What a dirtbag. Good for you in standing up and doing your best to protect yourself. I hope the police are involved, although I wonder how interested they might really be given on how much of the sort of thing goes on." And I can tell you now, Robert, thank you so much for that. And everything in there that you've put in is absolute truth. And it weren't for the fact that the police aren't interested. These people are ahead of the game. They turned around to me and said that the Bitcoin cipher that they gave me, which was 128 characters long, which would have used a certificate to, decrypt it and assign it to a particular physical location, would take a bank of computers and around about 4 months of computer time to actually decipher and find out. And by that point, the person's long gone. The hacker even puts in 48 hours because they know that if they're using an email address, it would take them 3 days to work out whose account it is, and then it'll be a hacked account. And that's why they do 48 hours and not 72 hours. But the police are interested, of course, but they're trying to come up with ways to turn this around faster, and I'm finding that difficult. Saying that, though, I spoke to an MOJ security person, and he told me a leap that I wasn't aware of. I might talk about it in the future, and they've turned it around 50% in the last 6 months, and there's something that they're just about to install that will knock that back another 25%, which means something that would take months is now days. And when it comes to the hacking of emails, seconds. I won't go any more into it than that, but it cheered me up no end and relaxed me to know that this software's out there. So don't want to give this guy any more airtime. Thanks for the mention. I hope I inspire you to play some Minecraft from time to time. You do. You do. I wish I played it a bit more. I'd have liked to have done more together. I always tended to find when I went back, it's because I wanted to reminisce. But then I always found I'm back to myself again, learning it all again, and no one to experience it with me. I'm so glad that you've got that energy, that you can find something new to do in that game and find and search and entertain us all. And long may you do so. But what tends to happen to me is that I've relearned it all again, or a majority of it. If I've seen one shipwreck, I've seen them all, etc., etc. And the biomes are now starting to become so familiar that although they're progressively generated, I get that samey feel again. And I need that person to excite me again. Which is why I went to Valheim. And it took a lot longer for me to get to that point again. But it did. You eventually get to that point, and then you go to V Rising, and then you get to the same point again. And you just keep on and on and on. So it probably be about a month or so before I'm going back to Minecraft again. Because as you say, they've brought out a new release. There's some new bits in it, and I have to go. Yeah, I got to learn this all again, and I've got that energy for me to do so. I'm hoping you continue. I'm hoping to get to Secret Wars before too long. I've been reading Supergirl, Women of Tomorrow for the last couple of days. It's quite enjoyable so far. Question: are there any DC Comics limited series graphic novels that you would especially recommend? An interesting one, because I'm Marvel, not DC, but I have read a lot of DC. But I read things like Batman the Dark Knight, which you'll know about. Superman, the Man of Tomorrow. Again, a great series. Old. You probably know about it. So I don't have too much to tell you, but I do know that I've got a big stash upstairs of what they call Elseworld stories. They used to be called Elseworld. Batman and Superman and the main characters in a different world where Superman is Russian, say. Batman is the enemy, not the hero. They're sort of like Marvel's equivalent to What If. What if somebody else was bitten by a radioactive spider, etc., etc. Those are probably the most entertaining. Watchmen is probably the biggest story you could watch or read in that series. Alan Moore, yeah, great. So I'll probably send you a couple of examples in a answer to this comment with a few things for you to read, Robert. So I won't. I'll continue for now. I feel like I've seen maybe 3 of the Mission Impossible movies. They're getting a bit too much of a formulatic thing for me, I think. Yeah, and I agree with you. It's just, I think I worded it best where I said Bond became the film of the stunt for that film type of movie, where they based the whole story really on one huge action stunt sequence, and each year it was, how can we top that? And Mission Impossible is the same sort of thing. Oh, how are we going to break into this place? Let's do the whole stunt sequence like this, and there'd be 56 cars involved. There'd be explosions going off everywhere. There'll be the last second that they've got to break in, and it counts down to 1 and stops, and they get in. On and on and on. And that's the formulatic part of it, and I totally agree. They're entertaining to watch, but they're not too much to go back to, which is why I ummed and ahed for a while to get the whole set. But I decided to, because they are still nice to go back to. When I do go back to them, I want them to be in the best picture format possible, so I can see them again with a bit more crystal clarity. But by then, I'll probably be on another thick set of glasses. My eyesight will be worse. Always that danger. At the end there, you got All Menacing. Nicely done. Yes, not to give too much to that guy again. I sort of turned into a Liam Neeson and his I know where you live, and I've got a certain set of skills. I was doing all that. Stupid of me, really, wasn't it? David's, so thank you, salute to you, Robert. David's retro games played badly. You're keeping me company at work as always, matey. I've been considering a fold Samsung phone. Maybe next time. Yeah, and I keep doing that. Every year I go, next time. Might jump on the bandwagon, but not at that price. Never played golf, although I love a golf game, electronic. Favourite point and click would have to be Simon the Sorcerer. Yeah, I didn't really mention Simon, did I? I did Monkey Island and all the others. I liked Simon. I played that on the Amiga. Scary Robot Hector from Saturn Free was really creepy, and I mentioned that one, but it was already mentioned, wasn't it? So it's not really an additional one to add. You're a huge fan of Peridius. That's great, because I am. Not many people are. Definitely worth a pick up and play, and I love to go back to that. My first car was an Austin Maestro. My one was a Maxi 1750 HL, if I remember rightly. Everybody used to turn around to me when I was driving that to work and saying 17, yeah, because it's an Austin Maxi 1750. That 1750 was the engine size, but they kept saying, was that the year it was made? And they always used to say, if I put a sunshine roof in the car, it'd be a Grundon. I had all those jokes made at me. Vauxhall Manta, mate. I had one. Yes, well, remember I mentioned the word Opel. Opel and Vauxhall are the same thing, and he had an Opel model, the Opel symbol. He didn't have the Vauxhall symbol, and I just couldn't remember the word Vauxhall. Don't know why. Just these things happen. But he had the Manta. It was a 2-litre version, and it was scary. You put your foot down on that, and it went. And it didn't have burn oil, like a lot of Vauxhall cars of that period. Spiky Harold is beyond me. Yeah, I watched 20th Century Gaming do it, and I just couldn't. And I watched recently Steve's Gaming do it, and believe me, he found out he couldn't. The Big Lebowski is great. Still haven't watched Mission Impossible. I'm glad that you've said all that, because Big Lebowski is what I'm looking forward to. I've seen the Mission Impossibles, so I can see what you mean when I get round to watching Big Lebowski. Nice collection of games. Heard good things about Heavy Rain. Yeah, I've played Heavy Rain, don't get me wrong, and I had it on Xbox. Didn't have the PS3 version. And you might be wondering, but they're so close together, why have both? It was 50 pence to a pound, matey. And one requires an installation on a hard drive, which says you need to clear space, and the other one nearly plays off the disc without you having to install it. So that's why I've sort of like done a lot more PS3s than Xbox stuff just recently. Plus, it's the right time to do it, PS3 at the moment. Great trailers. Thanks for the company. My pleasure. Thank you always, Dave, for commenting, because I really do like the bullet point things. It breaks it down into the sections that I think that you concentrated on. Tells me an awful lot of things that are good and what aren't. Paul Patrick has come and said, sorry to hear of your worries, Dell. Cybercrime is no joke, and universities in Scotland have recently been targeted by these criminals. You briefly mentioned laserdiscs during this week's blog. Do you have any particular favourite laserdiscs? Perhaps due to unique content, but never made it to the DVD or Blu-ray release, or movies that have never come to DVD or Blu-ray. The artwork on Laserdisc movie sleeves always looked incredible. Laserdisc seemed ahead of their time in some ways, with special features and audio commentaries that they offered years before DVD came to market. And oh my god, everything there has been mentioned by me in previous blogs, which if you go back you'll see. And it was a big chunk of my life where all my money, and I mean all my money, went into Laserdiscs, and I went full pelt with it. And some of my other hobbies suffered. Like things that suffered were like my vinyl soundtrack collection, that suffered. I didn't buy so much VHS tapes. A lot of stuff, right? The comic industry, I cut back on that. But so let's break this down into slices. I've actually shown an awful lot of my Laserdisc collection that I've still got. And the I suppose the defining Laserdisc I've got is the original Star Wars collection. It was called the Star Wars Definitive Collection. It came in format of standard play. So it was, I think they call that CLV, not CAV, right? So it came on many sides. There was like 3 discs per film. There were 3 films, so that's 3, 6, 9, of which there are both sides. So that's 18 sides to watch all 3 films. But it came with a book and a huge case, and it was lovely. And it's probably the king of my collection. And one of the only ways you can still watch the original without having the new special effects put in. But I had many Laserdiscs and they all became something new for me. So it's hard to pick ones up, but other ones were T2, Alien, Aliens, Creep Show, Jaws, Seven, Mrs. Doubtfire. Toy Story. Fantasia was a big one. Disney's Fantasia. Those come to mind. And I loved the idea that you could freeze frame. If the film was recorded in single play, you know, standard play, and you paused it, because it was a frame on a disc, the still frame was brilliant. VHS, you had to have tracking, and you'd always get a line or something. Awful it was. But I also like the idea that they isolated the score on one audio channel, or they put the whole film script at the end of the film as chapters that you could actually read through one page at a time. Oh, so many extra features like that. Plus, I had an amp. I had a THX amp at the time. I've got a THX amp now. I think my Denon is THX certified, but it's more Dolby Digital and Dolby Atmos now. We don't hear the word THX too much. LucasArts sound, basically. And I hope that answers your question. Paul Patrick, it says. I don't know if it's Patrick Paul or Paul Patrick. Hope I get it right. Steve, my old mate Steve, salute Steve. Hi mate, just got around to commenting on this. Thought I had, but I guess I hadn't. I was really sad to see your problem with this scum. I really hope you get all this sorted out once and for all. It must be very stressful to deal with. Yes, it was, Steve, and thank you so much. And thank you for trying to cheer me up with your own channel and showing me all of your death sequences. Not enough death, but you cheered me up, made me smile. Even China Miner made me smile, and that doesn't make me smile very often, I can tell you. Quick question for you. Are you interested in Baldur's Gate 3? It's out just about now. By the looks of it, it's seemingly a real gem of a role-playing game. So is it your cup of tea, or are you not interested? Oh my God, I thought you'd know this. My God, I will be buying Baldur's Gate 3. That's a certainty, first of all. Am I excited by it? Hell yes. I've known of its development for 3 to 4 years. And I hoped that it would be all that they promised. And all this week, because it dropped this week, people have been reviewing it. And I've stayed away mostly from these reviews. But the consensus, when I forward to the end, where they say what they want to say, they've all given it the thumbs up. I've heard a very small amount of bugs. But remember, when it comes to reviews, I tend to not watch them because I want to be excited by discovering it myself. But I do want to know if it's worth getting if there's too many bugs. And then, from what I've heard, it's not that buggy, and the buggy parts are multiplayer, which I'm not interested in anyway. Will I be buying it? Yes. When will I be buying it? Well, my next holiday is end of August, beginning of September. I'll probably get it then. The reason I'm not buying it this afternoon is it is $49.99. That's it. But I've got 2 weeks off, and I can actually physically get my brain to say, you've just bought this. Install it now. Play it now. Not, I bought it. I'll come back to it. It's in my library for when I want to do it. I'm going to do it at the time where I'm going to actually bloody install the thing and play it. God help me. I bet you any money you've bought it already and you're going to do a Steam Sunday on it. And if you are, just remember I can't really watch your version of it because I will be buying it shortly. Okay. I I hope that's answered that. As for Mission Impossible, I agree with Greg Morris, who plays Barney in the original series. He watched the Tom Cruise film and walked out halfway saying it was an abomination. I agree with him. The films are garbage of the highest order. Sorry, take care, and love to your mum. I love your opinions, matey. Don't be sorry at all. Tend to stay away from people that have walked off sets or have a thing to say about a film. In the case that they didn't walk off, they actually were sacked. And it's because of their own ego that caused it. I don't doubt for a moment that he didn't walk off. But it's just, it saddens me to hear that. And there are always two sides, and the industry only wants to know the negative one. The rest, they don't care about. There's none of that, what a wicked film that was. Wasn't it well done? It's always, what a wicked film that was. And, oh dear, but we've just heard this story that the directors bedded the co-star's wife, etc., etc. And I don't want to know that bit. You know what I mean? So, I hope that answers your question in the fact that I'm in agreement that Mission Impossible is garbage of a sort, but it's also entertaining garbage, and entertaining garbage to a lot of people that like that type of entertainment. And for them, they need their watching pleasure as much of us that don't like this. It's obviously therefore not made for you, Steve. It's probably therefore not made for me either, because we're quite like-minded. And we should go away going, hey, it's a thing, it's out there, there's a lot of people that enjoy it, it ain't just for me, that's all. And keep your gob shut from that point, really, I suppose. Trouble is, I can't keep my gob shut. So thank you, Steve, my salute to you, keep up that great work. And we move to Milfy Swimbuckle. Hello again, Dell. Question for your next blog. If you could ban one thing a year for a short time, say a day at most, and everybody else had to live by that ban as well, what would you get rid of? Question mark. What a question. Let's see what else you've put. P.S. I would have one day with electricity was outlawed completely, just so we could look up at the stars like our ancestors used to and see the Milky Way above us. Plus, it would be fun to see how everyone coped without TV, phones, internet, fridges, microwave, kettles, etc. Yes, it would, wouldn't it? And what a great analogy for you yourself, and telling us as well how you would have answered your own question. For me, all apps on phone disabled for one day. So I don't want to take away the ability that you can phone 999. I'd love it that you couldn't do anything on your phone other than make a phone call. Can't even do a photograph. Gone. For a day. Wouldn't that be bliss? No social media. No micromanaged games they want you to spend 69 pence on a loot crate for. All of that stuff gone for a whole day. Bliss. Too easy an answer. Let's see if I can think of another one. You can't visit another country for a week. We're so busy going, right, I live in this country, I go to work, it's approaching a holiday, I'm going to fly to another country without appreciating what's around us. I really like us to expand and go out and visit these countries and these lovely holidays that you can go into. But after a time where you've appreciated your own backyard, yeah, I'd add that one in for a week. That one. Stuff the day. Don't get me wrong. everybody needs to relax. Everybody needs to sit around a swimming pool with a margarita in their hands, right? But have you really visited Scotland? Have you really visited Wales? Have you gone to the beach? Have you done one of those walks? Have you took a walk through a forest? Took in the bird song? Yeah. You should do that. It's no good saying, yeah, I've been to the Hollywood sign. I've been to Man's Theatre. Seen all the stars on there. I've been to the Hoover Dam. Saw the neon lights in Vegas. Etc. And when they turn around and say, yeah, but have you been to, the Wookiee Caves? Cheddar Gorge Caves or the Rollright Stones or Stonehenge? And you go, no. And, well, what the bloody hell? You got all this stuff and you want to go and experience that because you saw it on telly, probably. Do a little bit of that is what I'd probably like to see more of, even for a day. Well, how much revenue would that bring in? I don't know. Thank you, Milfy. And lastly, Colin. Thank you so much for commenting, Colin. It's great that you have. Fingers crossed you get back into the swing of things at work. Don't forget foldable screens for mobile phones being touted as a feature. I hate the look of those, by the way. I still have a OnePlus 8 and have no intention of getting a new one for another 2 years. I'm going to talk about climate change on my next vlog. You've got my own take on it based on historical evidence and will be turning a conspiracy theory on its head. And I hope I've given enough people an uptick to that coming out shortly for you, because I'd love people to visit your site, see what you do more, and see some of the comments that you make, which mirror my own an awful lot of the time, but also are so bat crazy I don't know where you got it from. So I hope you get more people going to look at that, and that this blog's going to come out very shortly. In fact, it should do. It's the first week of the month. Yeah, so please look out next couple of days. Scariest robots for me when the goodies had robot replacements. Oh, God. Now we are going off in tangent, and I do remember that. That actually scared the crap out of me and gave me nightmares. I almost stopped watching the show. Yeah. And they did a Close Encounters of the Third Kind episode as well, didn't they? Yeah, I remember that. What about the Ford Fiesta XR2 turbo nutter bastard? I had a brief drive on one of those when I worked delivering cars, like a rocket engine on a roller skate. Well, the rocket engine on a roller skate to me, I think, was the Renault 5 GT Turbo. I mean, the Ford Fiesta XR2 is a great car, and it was a nutter bastard, like you turned around and said, but I didn't actually experience that one. It was an Escort XR3 that I went into, and it was a Vauxhall Astra Mark II GTI that I went into as well. And I'm just trying to think. Everything after that, when I was at school, when I was at work, was everybody was talking Cosworth. It was Cosworth this, Cosworth that. There was a Cosworth Granada, I think, or of a type, and a Cosworth, an Escort Cosworth. And you used to get these Cosworth chips from ProDrive, which was very near where I lived. They made the chips there. In fact, it doesn't hurt anybody knowing this where I am, but I mean, it's just that if you go along the M40, where they made these chips was right on one of the junctions, right? Very, very close to where I'm at. Really close, right? Junction up, right? You could come off the junction, Ramray ProDrive, get a load of Cosworth chips, take them back to Birmingham, and you could then put them into cars, change the chips out, and it would tune the car to rally standard rather than road standard. Yeah, all right. I remember that going. That was a big thing in the late 80s, early 90s. Yeah. You carry on anyway. Dairy, yes, absolutely. Could possibly go vegetarian if I really wanted, but I couldn't go vegan because dairy is a staple here. Yeah, that's what I was sort of like saying, wasn't I? Toilet seat screws are always rusted to hell and back by the time you need a new seat. Yeah, aren't they just? This one luckily has plastic, but it has a metal end which goes into the mechanism. And I think very much that that's probably going to be better because I had to saw through and drill out the whole metal bolt. Where if part of it was metal, you could cut through the plastic that's exposed. And that would get it off. Without having to drill from the top. Oh, that was a pain. Question for the next blog. How much do you know about maps? Different projections, digital maps, pros and cons of each. Ooh, well, maps obviously came to me when I wanted car satellite. Maps are all on my Fenix watch. And when I go, I can program in a location and it will download the map and show me the street view of it, etc., etc. It's great for orienteering. I can program an orienteering course. Doesn't have to show me the map. There'll be an arrow that's at the top of the face that swivels round whether I'm going in the right direction to get to the next orientation point. I remember at school we had to go on an orienteering course and they told us what all of the lines meant, which is the gradient of the hill and so forth for the, because it looked very much like a weather map. And of course I found out an awful lot on my watch when I played golf last because it was always calculating how far away the pin was because you could download the golf course and it would tell you where you were in projection to the pin. Only sometimes they didn't update the course and they'd change the pin that day to another green and you were shooting in the wrong direction. I did that once. I don't know as much about you, Colin, when it comes to maps. In other words, your map knowledge is going to totally obliterate me if we were ever to have an argument on it. Do I have enough to know to have a conversation on one? Yes. Do I love maps? Love them. How can you not love a map? They're great. Love them. What about maps to the stars? Oh, talk forever. Thank you, Colin. I'm really looking forward to your synth music this afternoon. I need something to relax. And that's the end of the questions. Jesus, took an age. So sorry. Let's try and go through the next bit as fast as we possibly can. I hope I'm looking okay. I hope I'm not looking like I'm dizzy. I certainly feel all right at the moment. Right, watched on TV this week in retro. As you know, there are a couple of shows I always have to watch, and this week in retro is one. They're back after their 2 weeks. Not so much here for me to talk about, but it's still an entertaining one, and I definitely recommend this week watching it. There was somebody throwing out a disc of Tron arcade machine. That was interesting. But not as interesting as the Retro Fake TV, which I actually watched. There's this new channel that's just come out about a bloke who... It's one of those rags to riches type TV shows where they get any old tack. They do it all up. And they all turn round and they say, yeah, look how much money I've made from this. And it's called Retro Workshop. And it's on one of the Freeview channels, I think. So obviously I can pick it up on Sky. They got this Atari, and it was a 6-switcher Atari. They bought it for £100. They sold it for 200, and they go through the process of how they fixed it, right? But there's apparently been a lot of Discord chatter on this week in retro. Plus, I've seen it talked in other Discord channels and websites where they seem to be very disingenuous. It looked very much like they seem to make you believe that they turned something from £100 into £200. But what you got to take into consideration is this guy, he had to buy certain bits of equipment to make it work. He had to clean it all up. He had to rewire it. He then had to sell it on. And all of those hours that the guy did would never have been enough to have turned around £100 profit. More like a fiver, if any. And I looked at the prices, and to be quite honest, you can pick up ones cheaper than what they did. The cartridge they put in to show that it was working looked like it was not a proper cartridge. It looked like it was one of those ever cartridges, you know, where multi-cartridge. So it all looked a bit disingenuous, to be quite honest. And I have to turn around and go, yeah, they always do. There's one on at the weekend. No, one on during the week that's on after Frasier on Channel 4, where they go to Barnes and they pick up all of this equipment, you know, like old signs and stuff. And then they do them up and they show them at some sort of like barn type environment, where this bloke comes in and says, I'd value that now at 200 quid and I'd value that now at 1,000. They do up things like bikes that are rusted up. And what you got to understand about this is if you've got the equipment, sandblasting equipment and all of that sort of stuff to get rust off, great. But I tell you what, it's not cheap. And if you think that you've turned something that you've picked up for 50 quid and then you've sold it for 500 and that's £450 profit, how much did that sandblasting machine cost you? How much did the enamel paint cost you? How many hours did it take you to rust protect it again, to get the chrome up to the proper standard again, to get the head gasket required, to get the engine going? All of that sort of stuff. You made no profit. Guaranteed. You know? Rant over. That was in conversation of this week in retro, along with the last one, which is preserving games in Australia, which was interesting, but only from a point of view that I'm interested in how we're preserving our own games. So definitely this week in retro was worth a watch. And then Tecmo was also worth watching for different reasons. He picked up a 1980 linear tracking turntable. Now, if you don't know what linear tracking is, most turntables have an arm. You lift up the arm, you move it across, you use a little knob to lower the arm, and there it is. Linear tracking is a bar at the back. The needle is in a fixed place, and it just moves across like this and drops down. And usually you can lift it up and use two buttons to just move it incrementally left and right, so you'll find where the start of the track is on a vinyl record. So he picked up one that was a national SLN25, and he fixed it because obviously the belt had gone, and he wanted to. But this one interested him because it was the first turntable that actually not only had outputs for you to put it into your own hi-fi, but it had speakers built in. So he did it all up and tested it, and just like I thought it would be, the speakers were awful. Absolutely atrocious. They were like listening to sound out of a tin can when you've got two tin cans and a piece of string between it, and you're talking to your mate while he put it to his ear. You talk to the can, and it sounded like that. Shit. Too thin. No bass. Speakers were far too small. Great, though, for just having a turntable play with no amp. But still awful. Definitely worth a watch. Definitely, if you're into your audio, watch Tecmo. Then on YouTube, they showed something that's only been on Paramount Plus just recently. The channel's called ATX TV, and they did a Cheers reunion. Now, I love reunions, but I don't like them all. But Cheers is one that I did watch all 11 seasons of. It took up a big chunk of my Fridays on a Channel 4 when it was first being broadcast. So it was nice for them to bring back the creators of Cheers plus 3 guests, which were, like Ted Danson and George Wendt, I think, was there. And it was nice to reminisce and hear their stories about how hard that show was to make at the beginning, how it was almost cancelled, and how much it was loved, and where the idea came from. I mean, I knew that the show before Cheers was Taxi, and I loved Taxi. So I knew I was going to like Cheers. Set in a bar, where can it go wrong? You got a story every week from any new person that went through the door that day. Such a, if there was ever a show that had legs, it was going to be Cheers from that point of view. So ATX TV, if you want to see the Cheers reunion, watch that. There was another guy that it came up because I think YouTube knows that I like anything to do with Commodore and pets and so forth. So one came up for a site called Control-Alt-Rees. Control-Alt-Rees, R-E-E-S. And he went to a museum in the northeast and he picked up some Commodore pets, a Commodore drive, an 8050 drive, along with some IBM PCs, because he wanted to contribute to the museum's health and he wanted to see what the insides of these machines were. And it was great looking again at a Commodore PET, which had a unique way of fixing the PET, because if you can imagine, the screen was sort of like built in. It was a great big hunking metal machine, right? But you lifted it up like a bonnet. So you lifted it up and an arm would be there, and you put the arm up and it clung to the top, and you could then work on all the problems with capacitors, like you look at the hood of a car. I forgot all about that. So it's great watching those sort of things back. So I had a great time with Control-Alt-Rees. Then we moved to Movie Collector, who I watch an awful lot of because he's a projectionist and I want to know about 4K discs that are worth getting based on how close they were to the negative of the film. But he's just finished his home cinema room. So he had one at his old house. He's just moved house. He's turned one whole room into a cinema with the proper seats, a projector, everything to watch his films on. And that just got completed. And it was nice to see the guy that was doing up the project, cutting holes in walls and getting the curtains up, getting the cinema screen up, marking out where the projector was going to be. Brilliant. And then, of course, there was part 2 on Retrobit's site this week for the A1000 restore that I mentioned last week. As you know, I had a day one Amiga 1000. So anybody that comes up with an A1000 in their title, I'm probably going to have it come up in my watch stream. And I've got such fond memories of my Amiga 1000 with Sidecar that, I'll probably watch those whenever they come up. And then lastly, there was I Am 16-Bit, which gave a Metal Slug retrospective, which is interesting to me because Metal Slug is one of those ones where I can't believe the Neo Geo is doing all this sprite manipulation. The graphics are so lovely and well drawn, and the sprites have got that animation type to them where you think to yourself, Christ, there must be 30 frames of animation for each of these characters. Huge amount of graphic memory required for the Metal Slug series. So that was worth looking at. And then we come across to the film section of what I did. So, of course, I watched Retro Rock God 2004 that I've mentioned before. Definitely watch his channel. But he did a new stuff, opening vinyl and some films this week. He unboxed a Duran Duran vinyl called Future Past. And obviously subscriber mail plus all of his guest panels for Movie Chat this week. Very busy guy, definitely worth watching. Playtendo guy's not been quite so busy, but he's done a number of streams, which I've really been appreciative of, because he puts them all together gets them all into to do the stream that day, and then facilitates it all. So you got to turn around and say what's not to like about this guy. Scott the Movie Critic invited me in a week or so ago. This week he's done a birthday haul and a subscriber mail video. So if you like watching those, I wonder what people have bought this week is, watch that. Do you see that? Which is Mike, sorry, I think his name is. Did you see that is a great channel, again, where you can get film reviews, what he's bought on physical media, and then a chat about anything. So you get guests in and talk about what their favourite films are and all that sort of stuff. Definitely worth a watch. Now, after watching all of those, each of them have got their own stream that they do once a week. So Playtendo Guy has got his Wednesday film chat. Scott has got his Friday film chat. And of course, Mark for Did You See That is on a Thursday. All around about the 7:30, 8 o'clock time. All worthy of your presence. And then we move to what you guys have done this week. And it was sad to see that there wasn't so much content this week. Good thing, because I was working 5 days a week. Bad thing, because I like to promote their stuff and have some interesting stuff to talk about. So, what did I watch? I watched Down the Rabbit Hole. He did a scramble on the NES, courtesy of Khan Games. And although that one doesn't sound the most exciting of videos, it really was. The NES was never that great at drawing certain backgrounds, you know. It has hardware scrolling and so forth. But this scramble, interesting how it drew the landscape, but it was the look and feel of the scrolling and the moving along and going through the levels that would have made me go, oh, if I had that back in the day, I'd have had it. Do you know what I mean? Fan made, definitely worth it. Then he deliberated on Tim Horton's chicken noodle soup. Now, this is where I watch them because A, they're fun, and B, I know nothing about what the topic is. Now, he cooked some noodle soup and then told us whether it was as good as the best equivalent. And his best equivalent is, what do they call themselves? Campbell's, is it? Campbell's noodle soup. We've got a Campbell's over here. But I'm not a big fan of noodle soup. So I found it entertaining, but not one that I would go back to and watch again. But anybody that's interested and wants a laugh, seriously wants a laugh, watch that video because it seriously was funny. And then, of course, he did a comparison of Street Fighter 2 and Street Fighter Alpha 3 on the Game Boy Advance. I wanted to list sort of like the pros and cons of playing these games on a small screen. And so Down the Rabbit Hole this week has been a very busy person, and one that I wholly recommend you go and subscribe to now. And if you don't subscribe, at least watch some of those videos because they're hilarious, absolutely brilliant. Love them. Steve's Gaming, he's expanding out again. He's done a What's This, which is a new channel of his. He's done an Atari 8-bit and an MSX this week. He did a Spectrum last week, which I mentioned. Great little channel, really love that. And then he did a stream Sunday where he played Shadows Awakening. Now, I have to talk a little bit here because I love Steam and I play some games myself off of Steam and then tell you guys about it by commenting back. And I think that they're invaluable, and watching Steve's channel to do this is a very, very good thing for you to do. Unfortunately, he's playing at the moment games I've got in my library, but then again, it's pretty difficult to find games I haven't got. But definitely worth a watch. I think you get some major fun out of it. Robert's Retro Gaming carried on his Minecraft in Exile series and has gone from 46 to 49 as of this recording. And he also did an Atari 8-bit review of Air Rescue and Kissing Cousins. So both of those were entertaining. I think I got more out of the Minecraft than I did the other two games. But those were still fantastic set of games. Definitely worth watching. Then you got to Steve's Gaming. We got to Mainmeister. Yeah. He did his Sunday Sunday stream and his Friday waffle. Both always incredibly entertaining. Definitely worth watching. The Friday waffle is a staple point now. It's a little bit like my channel, where you're talking about things that happened this week that you might want to refer to in the future and go back to. So definitely watch Mainmeister do that. And then we've got Magda, and I'll just call her Kay, which I always do. She's just received a Washington car plates, which means that she can now drive around Washington. And it made her quite upset because it closed a chapter on her life where she's moved away from, because she's now living in Seattle in the Washington state. And it got her quite emotional, and I can see it in her. And she's doing okay, but it's definitely worth watching if you want to see how certain emotions make you feel. And we got to the last bit, which is what I've watched on TV. Not an awful lot. It's been a busy week and I've been falling asleep with lack of energy and so forth. But I did watch Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which is, I think, the penultimate episode. So one from last. So it's season 2, episode 9. And my opinion of it is it was atrocious. I'm not a big fan of musicals. They turn the whole thing into a musical. They suddenly burst into song. They're going into battle. They burst into song. They find an artifact. They start a song. It was awful. Up amongst the worst of Star Trek original series. I'll talk about the actual season as a whole, though, next week, where we're up to the last of the series. And then, of course, I watched a documentary, 100 Years of Comedy. And that's the end of that. 100 Years of Comedy was great, definitely worth looking at, but I'm going to show you a media clip of that so that you can make your own decision. But basically, comedy has been around since the 1890s. So it's something that you need to address in documentaries, and I hope watching the documentary opens your eyes. There's only a couple of things that have come this week. Well, one thing that's come this week, and another thing that I found in my garage. This came this week, which is the Fifth Element. Oh, Fifth Element. Put it on the other camera. For God's sake. Wake up. There we go. Fifth Element from Arrow, I believe. And it's a nice box set. If I put it that way round, you can sort of like see what comes with it. A Luc Besson film. If you're into your science fiction type films, it's worth a watch. If you're not, you're going to get no enjoyment out of it. I like Luc Besson. Luc Besson did Leon and Nikita, The Big Blue, Lucy, amongst a number of other films. A French director with a very, very precise visual eye. The worst that you can get away from his films, is the visuals were nice. Those vistas were beautiful, but the story and so forth was shit. That's said an awful lot against his films, but what I'm trying to get at is there's a lot of good amongst his stuff. And then I was going through the garage, and then I found this. Falcon 4. I haven't played Falcon 4 in years. Look at the size of this box. My God. And those graphics at the time. Now, I believe Falcon 4, there's a project where you can actually play Falcon 4 on your PC without installing. But this was from Microprose, and just like Steve says, where it says their manuals were second to none. Look at the thickness of that manual. Jesus. I mean, we're talking, you must have a serious wobble on your chair if you're going to just not read the manual, but you're just going to you bought it just for the manual, because a lot of people turn around and say, yeah, I like books for wobbling, getting the stool not to wobble when I'm sitting down on it. But Falcon 4 was one of those lovely games that I bought to test out my graphic card, fell in love with, played it for months and months and months. And it was at a time where the other type of simulator that was coming out was for games like TFX. And that was a brilliant game, I think, released by Ocean. But Microprose always did lovely manuals, and that is definitely a game I'm going to have a re-look at. And I'm going to have a look and see whether you can actually get the fan version without having to pay for it, because I'd like to see what it looks like with a modern engine. Certainly. So we turn to media and the videos that I play. Now, hopefully I won't get a copyright strike. Hopefully you'll get to see this, and I won't be having to cut it out and have you watch my blog much later on a Sunday than I want you to. So we'll change back. Oh, just bear with me. We'll change to media view. Only a couple of films this week because I've just had no time. But I hope you like these little video snippets. And I'll see you on the other side. So I'm just going to turn my microphone off now. Hopefully I get it the right way around. See you soon.
It's showtime. Of all the genres in motion pictures, comedy is perhaps the best loved. It started with the birth of motion pictures 100 years ago. During the 1890s, pioneer movie makers were trying to figure out what to do with the new contraption of motion pictures.
Are you the police?
No, ma'am. We're musicians.
Just take those old records on.
Look at my eye. My right eye. See how? My right eye.
I said listen to myself.
God darn.
Today's music ain't got the same sound.
Let's go get Nathan Jr.
That was a good movie.
I love this movie. It was genius. What's that, lad? Oh, this will be yours.
What, the curtain?
No. Into the mud, come queen.
No matter how talented, women had trouble getting the starring roles in comedies.
Maybe I'll shave.
And often talented actresses were relegated to supporting roles.
What do I do?
Nothing, dear. You're not qualified.
Oh, you be the judge.
This guy means business.
The 1990s find the movie comedy genre 100 years old.
Better get a bucket, let's throw
Yet it can be certain the movie comedies of the future will continue to flourish. After a century of movie comedy, the laughter goes on.
I don't get it.
Great.
Every 5,000 years.
Remove the shield.
When the three planets are in eclipse, the black hole like a door is open. Evil comes, spreading terror and chaos.
There's nothing that can stop this.
There is only one thing.
Perfect.
The
Montechiwan have in their possession the only weapon to defeat evil. 4 elements, gathered around a 5th. They're here.
Hello.
Corbin, sweetheart. You got broken fingers, you can't punch my number?
Hi, Mom.
Welcome on. Have a nice day.
Major Dallas. You're selected for a mission of the utmost importance.
What mission?
Save the world.
Is that thing solid?
Unbreakable.
Good.
Where are the stones?
I don't know. And even if I did know, I wouldn't tell somebody like you.
There's nowhere else to go.
In God's name, I do such a thing.
Hang on.
This is crazy. Look at this. If you win this mailing contest, you can choose between $90,000 or 90,000 donuts.
What the hell?
What did you do?
Hang on, I can't steer. Can you believe this?
Folks all right?
Our car broke down.
I can give you a ride to Bell's, a little diner about 5 miles down the road. They got a payphone. You call a tow truck. They just come in and haul you out.
Excuse me. I was supposed to meet my wife here. She's dark-haired, about 5'5".
Doesn't ring a bell.
Listen, I'm looking for my wife.
Look, I don't know how to tell you this, but I've never seen you before in my life.
It was him. It was this truck.
I searched the truck. No sign of a struggle.
You know, there's over 100,000 people go missing in this country every year, all vanishing without a trace.
My wife did not leave me.
You the fella looking for his wife?
I saw what happened.
We're gonna be watching you.
When do I see my wife?
Soon enough, Jeff should start walking.
Get down on the ground!
Police, this one's in on it.
What do you want?
You better pray she's alive.
Where is she?
And I had to remember to put the microphone back on. So there's a couple of ones that are worth watching there. I mentioned that the 100 Years of Comedy, it's a bit of an older documentary, but comedy is something that I've been around for years, and I've been watching a lot of Laurel and Hardy and Abbott and Costello just recently. And it's an interesting documentary to see how like it said in there, you know, women have found it really hard to get parts back in the day. The Fifth Element is The Fifth Element. You either know about it or you don't. But Luc Besson, such an interesting director. Definitely recommend going to Wiki, say, putting in Luc Besson, just looking at some of the work that he's done and choosing a genre that he's done and watching it. And then see whether his visual style works, because it's the visual style that made me watch Luc Besson films. And Breakdown. Now, this is an interesting one, Breakdown, because I bought Breakdown when I had a Laserdisc player. Loved it to death. It was a sleeper hit. And then it went off the radar. And that's the problem that you have with a film like Breakdown, because it's far superior, in my opinion, to a lot of crap that's out there at the moment. Back then, it was filmed on a shoestring budget, which if you tried to look at now, you'd laugh at, and it would never have been made, even. And the problem with it is you only remember it because you're flipping through your film collection. If you were just to see the word Breakdown in a list, you'd be going, what? Doesn't sound very interesting to me. You add the person that's in it to it, and you'd go, I think I remember about it. You put the visual element in it, and you go, oh yeah, damn, I remember that film. Why haven't I watched that? It must be 20 years since I've seen that film. That is me, the fossil, that saw this the first time round and loving the fact that my friends that are chatting about films are now starting to discover this type of film. And with that, I'm going to say salute, and I'm going to try and enjoy the rest of my Sunday. And next week, I'm going to the Zap event. Exciting times. God, I've got a lot of work to do because royalty is coming down and I need to make sure it's spick and spam. Otherwise, I'm going to get shit kicked out of me in their own blogs. So with that, salute, and see you next time. Hopefully. Bye-bye.